There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Well, I am so excited. I'm about to pee my pants. I'm here with the BookTube royalty.
Royalty?
Yes, I mean I'm the empress, but you are another empress in your own right. This is Kim of the fabulous BookTube channel, Native Lady Book Warrior, and also of the Hopi Nation, joining us today from the Navajo Nation in Arizona. Kim, this is just so darned exciting.
Yes, it is. I am jumping out of my jeans right now, but well, I'm so excited to be here.
I'm wetting my pants and you're jumping out my jeans. This is going to be spectacular.
Yeah, I was so excited to make it to Bite Size Book Chats. I am such a huge fan. So
your check is in the mail. I think most of my subscribers will be your subscribers already, but there will be a few that have never heard of you. So please shout out your channel. Tell us about your channel.
Oh, okay. So first of all, Lomaktalongba, my name is Kim. Like Sean said, my channel is called Native Lady Bookwear. And most of the time I try to prioritize BIPOC reads, but mainly I love anything written by an Indigenous author, of course, within the United States, but I don't discriminate. I love plenty of Canadian authors like Billy Ray Belcourt and Joshua Whitehead Canada has some pretty amazing Indigenous authors, and of course all the authors from Australia and all around the globe. So that's mainly what I read. But I love lit fic. I was a huge fantasy reader, but I didn't realize how much I was missing out on literary fiction. So I'm a huge lit fic reader right now. And also I'm starting to dig in a little bit into poetry. I don't know how the hell you review poetry, but I'm loving it. And I'm a pretty big nonfiction reader too. So yeah, that's
fabulous. I enjoy poetry in small doses, and I, like you said, I have no idea how to talk about it. We're actually here to talk about a Korean novel, which sounds really interesting too. And it is called Beasts of a Little Land by Juhea Kim. She's actually a Korean American writer. She was born in Korea but lives in Portland, Oregon. And did you love this novel or did you like this novel? Which is the best verb to use?
I love this novel. Interesting enough, I actually read this novel via audiobook. And most of the time I can't really get an idea. Like I have to have this book in front of me to see like how it's written and the prose and all of that good stuff. But God, just the narrator was incredible, but also it was just amazing. It's just such an amazing read. It's probably one of my top 3 reads of 2021. I think I read it in December, but I still think about it. And it's such an amazing piece of literary work.
Fantastic. So tell us about the book.
Okay, so first of all, this is actually a debut novel. It's a historical fiction. It takes place in Korea, I think a span over 50 to 60 years. So specifically, I think the years were 1917 to 1965. And the book begins with a Korean hunter coming upon a tiger in like a snowy winter, and then he's captured by this lost squad of Japanese soldiers because it's during the Japanese occupation during that time. And I won't go on from there. It's such an amazing opening, and I just want to say that opening very much sticks, and it's such a remarkable beginning for this book. And I dare say this theme of beasts, of that first word of that title, is reflected throughout this novel and all the way to its conclusion. But this book follows several characters, and from almost like I think about 3 generations, and some of the characters are actually descendants of previous characters, and they are all connected by fate, destiny, during the time of Japanese occupation of Korea, and then on steadily onto the Korean independence. So the characters span from like homeless children to courtesan to activists to soldiers to politicians, and so it's really amazing. And then to see kind of like Korea transitioning to modernity and to see that growth there, not just colonial, so Korea itself growing, and that independence in the people, and it's pretty amazing to read.
The synopsis on Goodreads talks about that really dramatic opening scene with the tiger. And then it goes into talking about the two main characters, Jade and Jungho. And it doesn't make a connection between that really arresting opening scene and then these two protagonists. And you haven't made a connection too. So I think there's a special treat in store for readers to read the book and find out what the connection is, right?
Yes, definitely. Yes. And I think what's really cool about it too is these two protagonists are also connecting you to characters outside them. And then those characters in their little circles are also steadily connect to each other somehow. So it's like all these really amazing threads going back and forth, like this really amazing literary spider web. And you don't get lost in any of it because she just develops these characters so wonderfully. And you're just like, oh. So I also want to say that this is in my opinion, I know that some people are saying, oh, there's a really great balance between characters and plot. But in my opinion, it's very character driven. There's not a whole lot of plot, I think, because it's spanning such a very lengthy time span. Yeah. But you don't really want to see what happens next. You almost want to see like, oh my gosh, which character is going to pop up now and kind of fall into this kind of this overlapping of characters and their growth and their development or even their demise. So it's really interesting to see these characters and how in my opinion, that writing is just masterful. Okay. It's beautiful. And even when it gets gritty, there's even an elegance in the grittiness. So it's pretty amazing.
Well, that's beautifully described. So I'm going to wet my pants for the second time in this bite-sized chat. You're totally selling this book to me, Kim.
Yeah. Go read it.
Tell us about Jade and Jungho.
Oh my gosh. I want to say that they are definitely characters that you're rooting for and you're cheering them on. You want them to kind of grow because they come from places that are unfortunate and places of poverty. But at the same time, like, how can you root them on when all of this brutality, especially when it comes along with colonization, is happening around them, and you see them changing in order to adapt to that violence and to adapt to that brutality. And it's interesting to see these characters kind of like this roller coaster of growth and drop and growth and drop, and then how even their presence also inspires either the best or worst in other characters. So it's dramatic in a sense. And my eyes were just like popping out with every little kind of like character reveal or plot reveal, even though it was very small. But then you're like, how I think what Juhea does really well is she sets you up to, oh my gosh, now how is this going to affect this character? Or what is this person and the way or their actions and how they're developing, whether if it's for the worst or the best, going to affect these people. So it's really cool to like have that in the back of your mind, like during when you're reading. And I found it to be kind of stressful sometimes, but I think that's what I really enjoyed about it too. So kind of almost gets a little bit messy, and it's interesting because this love triangle that's happening, and it's almost, I don't want to say it's romance in your face. It's definitely not. It's almost kind of like a backdrop. But I think what's happening between these characters, they almost brush by each other, those love interests, but then of course they don't know like who they are, right, until later. And then that affects, of course, like how they treat one another, especially from where they began, because especially Jungho, he has a very, very humble beginnings. And then of course that other character actually comes from privilege and power. And of course, when there's occupation and all kinds of turmoil going on with governments and what have you, you can very easily see role switch, right? You see people going to prison for politics and all this kinds of stuff. So you very much see that within the characters too. And I found that to be pretty dramatic, but also like very emotional. It was so honest for that time, for what was going on. You can't have these nicely woven like stories. I'm sure they exist, but those aren't the stories that I'm passionate about. I almost get disappointed when like everybody at the end of the story is living happily ever after. I kind of want to just toss that book right out. I'm like, come on, like give me the honesty and rawness. So I think that's why I'm kind of like moving over to the literary side of fiction, because it's just humanity at its awesomeness. And even if you see growth, thriving, or failure, or even just survival, I feel like those stories are so important for our time.
Well, Kim, thank you so much for all of your awesomeness on your own channel, and for sharing some of that awesomeness with me on mine. I hope you'll come back someday.
Yeah, definitely. And you got to come to my channel too.
Okay. I am absolutely delighted that Justyna from Ireland is back, and we are going to talk about a Ukrainian novel that I was hoping somebody that I knew would read so I could have them on bite-sized book chats. Justyna, how are you?
Thank you so much for having me, Sean. I was really excited when you asked me to talk about this particular book, because I read it a few weeks ago and I really loved it.
Can we share the story? We don't have to if you don't want, about your telepathy.
Yes, we can. So yeah, after I finished the book, I literally thought, oh wow, that's the book I would love to speak to Sean about. So then when you messaged me a few weeks later.
Telepathy. So I suppose we should mention the title. It is a Ukrainian novel, Gray Bees by Andrey Kurkov, translated from the Russian, which is Kurkov's native tongue, by Boris Dralyuk, which I don't think I know how to pronounce, but
I'm not sure. I said Dralyuk.
Okay.
That's what I found in an interview that the translator himself was actually doing with the author. It was actually quite an interesting interview, and I would recommend, if anyone is interested in this book, there is like loads of interviews on YouTube with the author.
Great.
Very recent ones as well.
Yes, because he's been quite active since the evil invasion started. So it was published in 2018 in Russian, and the translation is 2020. Tell us about this book, Justyna.
The book is set in the grain zone, just like no man's land, between the pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine and Ukrainian forces. The main character, Sergej, he lives in this small village where there is only him and one other guy who used to be kind of like his enemy when they were younger. But now, because of circumstances, they kind of have to be friendly, because it's literally only two of them. Everyone left because there is like shelling still happening. Both sides, the village is between the two sides, so it's not really safe there, and everything is destroyed. There is no shops, there is no post office, there is no police station, there is nothing. They eat whatever they can plant themselves, or sometimes they get humanitarian aid. The main character is a beekeeper, retired mine worker, and to be able to get some food for himself, sometimes he like exchanges the honey that his bees make for food. And he has 6 beehives that he's very passionate about. His wife and daughter left him. They went to a bigger city where it's safer as well. So he's there with his 6 beehives, and spring is approaching. And he's thinking that he should bring his beehives like kind of on holidays for them to be more relaxed without any of the shelling going around and from the region. So he decides to go to the west of the Ukraine, and then his trip brings him to annexed Crimea, where he knows Crimean Tatar, who is a bookkeeper as well, like him. So he decides to move his village, although he's happy to be there. Like he could have left, but he doesn't want to leave. he likes where he lives. Well, if you can say he likes it, but he's like okay living there. But he kind of has to leave the place because of his bees. He's really trying to protect them, basically,
So there's
for them to honey.
there's a certain irony that his wife and children were stressed out. They wanted to get the heck out of there, and that wasn't good enough for him to leave. But the fact that his bees were stressed
I think
out.
he's already divorced. Yeah.
Oh, so that was going to be my next question when you said they left. So there was a divorce. Okay, so he's all alone.
Yeah.
And then where he was living, where there was so much shelling and so on, is that the Donbass region?
Yes, he lives in the Donbass area. And I think it's worth mentioning here because when I was watching the interviews with the author of the book, with Andrey Kurkov, at the start of every interview, he was saying those two things that are important to understand the context of the novel. First, he said that not many people from the West understand that it's not just Ukrainians, that in Ukraine you have people from Donbass region, and their mentality will be different to, let's say, from Tatars from the Crimea region, or from like people who live in Kiev. So he said that's very important to understand the Donbass mentality, Donbass people mentality. That's what he was stressing always, to understand this book properly. And I have to agree. He said that Donbass people very often, like the Donbass region, that's their country, that's their territory, that's their religion. They don't often identify, like even our main character, they don't strongly identify, oh, I'm this or that. I'm just from Donbass region, that's my region. Like the author made a good point. He said that the Sergeyevich, the main character, is a perfect representative of the gray zone that existed in Donbass region before 2014, meaning like Donbass people, he said, I'm just saying what he said because I'm not an expert. So that's why I watched the interviews with him to be able to like talk about the Donbass people. He said that they are the least traveled group from Ukraine. They just stay in the region, that's their region. What's inside their fence, that's their territory. So at the same time, he said there are many people who will be thinking about, like, let's say, Soviet Union times with sentiment, because they have access to Russian TV, they're watching Soviet times movies. So they are sentimental about that. They take pride in their like hard work, in their industry. That was, Donbass was known for its industry.
It was that sentiment that thug war criminal Putin took advantage of in 2014.
Yes.
Kind of.
Yes. They were working on it. Yeah. The Russian TV that many people in that region would be watching. They were working.
Is this a political novel?
No, not as much as you might think, like it sounds. It isn't. And definitely doesn't have any like strong message. Andrey Kurkov said that he was actually accused many times that it wasn't patriotic enough. I wouldn't say it's like strongly
in terms
political.
of Ukrainian patriotism.
Yes, yes. Yeah. It's very quiet novel, but especially the first part. Many people say, "Oh, the first part is my favorite." When the main character is in the village and like everyday life. The author called the first part the village saga, and then the next two parts he called road movie. So when he left his village, he went first to the more western part of the Ukraine, where he was looked at with suspicion, because once people heard that he was from Donbass region, they were like straight away assuming he was pro-Russian. Andrey Kurkov said that his inspiration for the novel was when he met one of the resettlers that came from Donbass area to Kiev, and he opened a coffee shop there. And he said, the resettler said that he keeps going back to the grain zone to bring like food and supplies, medicines to this village where there is still 7 families staying in that village, and there is no pharmacy, there is no post office. So when the war started, he was asked in 2014, because that's when it really started. He was asked, "Oh, are you writing a book about that?" And he said, no, I will wait many years. But then after meeting the resettler from the Donbass region, he actually thought it would be a good idea to write a book, but not about, because there, he said that it's already like 200 books about soldiers, about, brave people fighting to make the Donbass region, again, like Ukrainian and stuff like that. And he said there are so many books about that he just wanted to write a novel about a civilian person, about like just normal human being living in that Donbas region, how it is like day-to-day life for them.
Well, this sounds like a good place to start. I've been curious about him ever since everything blew up because of Putin in Ukraine, and that this would be the writer to read. And I think I will start with Gray Bees. Thank you for telling us about it, Justyna.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Ron from Houston is back. Ron, welcome back.
And thank you, Sean. It's great to be back. I always enjoy talking books with you.
Me too. We have an expression in Japanese, kochirakoso. Kochirakoso, which means it is I who should say so. Kochirakoso. And we're here to talk not about a Japanese novel, but a Mexican novel that took a long time to get translated into English. And it is called The Love Parade by Sergio Pitol, translated from the Spanish by George Henson. And there it is, very bright red cover.
One of the things that I love about it, you look very closely at the cover, which it doesn't come across here, but there's a wonderful drawing of a building in Mexico City on the front that was done by a translator, not the translator for the book, but a translator by the name of Kit Schluter, who's a good friend of George Henson's, who lives in Mexico City. And he actually sat down in front of the building, which is a key character in the book.
Ooh.
And did a wonderful drawing that's now the cover of the book.
That's awesome. So tell us about the book, and if it fits into the opening premise, tell us about the building as well, Ron.
Yes, because the building is critical. And one of the reasons that and it really has been a recent favorite of mine, it's from Deep Vellum, which is from nearby Dallas, a great independent publisher. And it was actually George Henson who brought Sergio Pitol to the English-speaking audience. He first translated him and found him, I think, back when he was getting his MFA, and that was his MFA project. And so it's a book from 1984. And one of the things that I really enjoy, I'm an aficionado of architecture, and truly the building itself is one of the characters. It's known. It's the Rio de Janeiro building, and it's still in Mexico City. And I'm hoping to see it in a few weeks. And it's also known as the House of the Witches. It's a very sort of Mexican Gothic looking house.
Well, if I can find a good picture of it, I'll put that up or overlay that on the video so people can see it. Why is it called the House of Witches?
Because it has a history of perhaps being haunted.
Aha. Well, you be careful if you're going to go see it.
Yes, that's why I'm not going inside. I'm only staying in. Because what happens is there's a historian who's from this area and actually grew up his early childhood in this building, comes upon unexpectedly a cache of papers, including letters that involve a party that occurred when he was a youngster at another apartment in this building. And so he's back in Mexico City. He walks by the building, sees where he grew up, remembers that this is where this party occurred. And so the novel is about his efforts to determine what happened at this party.
Okay. And was this party set in the 40s?
Correct. Early 40s. And he's telling the story. The book was written, you were right, it's a while ago in 1984. So it's like 40 years after he goes back to investigate what happened. It's so well plotted because what happens is he goes through and he finds some of the people who were either at the party or familiar with it still live in the building. Others are elsewhere. So he basically interviews the different occupants, different people who are at the party, different people who heard about the party. And there was at least one person shot and killed at the party, and two other participants were shot and seriously injured.
1942, Mexico was a pretty darned interesting place.
So it's right after Mexico declared war on Germany. And so just being sort of in where it is, and Mexico is fascinating because It's somewhat like Italy. There's so many different political parties and persuasions. There were German communists, Spanish Republicans, Trotsky.
Trotsky himself was there, yeah.
Yeah, so you get all of these influences, and what happens, you see, as he goes through and interviews some of these characters, some of them are from the upper class, some of them, not so upper class.
I see that it's described as a historical novel, a detective novel, and a comedy of misunderstandings all in one. Would you agree with that description?
Definitely. And this one is that the political aspect of it is very lightly applied. But what is fascinating is just how when they say misunderstandings, some of that has to do with the background or the political persuasion that you bring to the book.
Do you know anything about the author? I see he just died 4 years
Yes,
ago.
he died a bit ago. In fact, I've learned about him mostly through hearing George Henson talk about him. One of George's missions is to get more of Pitol out into the world. He has, I think, done 3 of his books, and another one is coming.
Yeah, I see Henson has translated quite a bit. 3 essay memoir collections, 1 short story collection. So you're going to possibly see this haunted building in shortly?
Yes, we're scheduled to go down to Mexico City at the end of this month.
Here's my idea, and I'd like you to get a selfie with the building in the background, and I will put it in right now in the interview. How's that?
Happily done.
That's great.
Idea.
Oh, Ron, it sounds really fascinating.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
I think I will too. Thank you so much for telling us about it. Well, this is delightful. I have a brand new guest on Bite Size Book Chats, somebody that started following my channel because of one of my most controversial videos, Vittoria from Montreal. Welcome, Vittoria.
Thank you, Sean.
How lovely. Now, we're not going to talk about this in any detail, but my controversial video through which Vittoria found me was my review of Where the Crawdads Sing. And we're not even going to get into whether Vittoria agreed with my review or disagreed with it, but she apparently has been following my channel ever since. So how lovely.
Thank you. Very kind.
And we are here to discuss a historical novel. Just came out in early February this year, 2022, from Canada, When We Lost Our Heads by Heather O'Neill, which sounds fascinating. So Vittoria, please tell us about maybe the opening premise of the novel.
But these 2 families in 1873 living in the Golden Square Mile that we have here in Montreal. It's the huge mansions right up on the mountain. And of course, it's home to the rich folk. One family, that of Marie's, is very wealthy, the wealthiest and most prominent in Montreal at the time. And the family operates a sugar factory down in the lower end of the city. The other family, the Arnett's, they inherited the house, and they only have just enough money to maintain appearances. They're power hungry, and they want to climb up the social ladder. So when Zadie started her friendship with Marie, they were delighted because that would be a plug for them, right? But unfortunately, their competitive nature sparked jealousies between them, and an incident happened that separated them. And many years later, they took up this friendship again. This novel is about women in 1873, how they're treated, how they were supposed to behave, how upper class were supposed to be reserved and discreet. The lower class were just overworked, underpaid, and open to sexual. There's 2 options for the working woman of the lower class. You worked in a factory or you worked at the brothel.
Right. And we know which one would pay better. We know which one.
Yeah, exactly. You know which one would pay better.
So the 2, Marie and Sadie, the 2 main characters, they met when they were 12 years old.
12 years old.
And they were like oil and vinegar in many ways. It was a deep, intense friendship that had a lot of conflict. Is that a fair description of how
Yes,
things
because
started?
they both liked being the center of attention. And of course, that's going to cause a bit of conflict. Everything was fine in the beginning until Marie won first prize at a recital that
Oh,
Sadie thought she should have gotten.
oh.
So, and that's right in the opening pages. So we
I-
don't have to consider that a spoiler.
Yeah. How would you describe their personalities?
Both very ambitious, and each a little odd in their own way. Yeah. Sadie, she was an attention seeker and would not behave appropriately for the time. He, of course, was the opposite. She was from the wealthiest family in the neighborhood, so of course she would behave to the T. Marie will be jealous of Sadie having the privilege of not being so reserved and a little bit more open. And she wished she could have been like that as well.
I understand from the synopsis that Marie is kind of sweetness and light, and Sadie
Mhm.
is more consumed or obsessed with darkness.
Yes. And of course, and physically, one blonde and blue-eyed, and the other one is dark-eyed and dark-haired. So very distinct in personality and looks.
And so what started out as kind of a childish game playing that has some thrilling aspects eventually, but well, they're still teenagers, I believe, it takes a dangerous, deadly turn. And we're not going to say any more about that.
That's right.
The names are pretty interesting. Marie Antoine and Sadie. So what's going on with all the names? They kind of harken back to an earlier era of history, do they not?
Yeah, it draws direct parallels with the French Revolution. And because this book is leading up to, it's about women and leading up to how they eventually started fighting for it themselves and fighting to be seen and fighting to be heard. So the two revolutions are being compared. And a lot of the names of the characters, the women in this book, are drawn from important figures of the French Revolution as well.
So the two main characters, Marie and Sadie, sound fascinating, but you have already told me that you found some of the secondary characters held your interest even more in this novel.
Yes, because in the book, like the woman quietly and progressively had, enough, and started revolting, and it was led quietly by a woman named Georgina Danton, which is taken from George Danton. So he also was an influence in the French revolutions of the 1700s, but Georgina in Montreal in 1873, she just loved women and wanted the revolution for the sake of the woman and not for any violent or vengeful motives. She just wanted to help her gender. Then we have Mary Robespierre in Montreal, who wanted the most violent approach, like Maximilien Robespierre did back in France in the 1700s. And her motives were more of revenge.
Sounds fascinating. And Vittoria, thanks for telling us about it. I hope you'll come back someday.
Thank you. I hope so too, Sean.